Right, I don't.
Yeah, the thing that the screen is not high enough.
Okay.
The button forward, the button to go back. Shut microphone at on. I got a video from this.
Are there on?
Yeah, there.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Good morning. I don't think this is on. That's okay. My name is Denise Saunders-Thompson. I am the Assistant Dean for the Chadwick A. Bozeman College of Fine Arts, and welcome to Bison at Basel. This is our first panel this morning with amazing panelists of women. Women in the arts, women who have a very strong and rich history in supporting HBCUs and coming from HBCUs. This panel will be led by Summer Hill from NPR. We have artist Amber Robles. Gordon Robles, excuse me?
No, Amber Robles Gordon.
Excuse me, Amber Robles Gordon.
Thank you.
Yes, artist Amber Robles Gordon. And of course, our dean, Phylicia Rashad. All right, ladies, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here in sunny Miami. It's beautiful out. I'm so glad that you all were able to join us as well. I'm looking forward to a conversation with you all. Are we good?
Yeah.
Good? Okay. So since we've already done introductions, what I'm going to do is have a conversation with you all, and then I'll open it up for Q&A if you all have any questions for our panelists this morning. Okay, well, let's get into it. Let's talk about your time at Howard to begin with. I want to know what made you all, I know you went to Howard graduate and you went undergrad, but what made you all choose Howard in the first place?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I've known I wanted to be an artist since I was 8 years old. And, but my perspective was I wanted to be able to run a business. So I actually got my business degree first from Trinity College. And so then I went to, as I was finished that, and I started to go look, okay, I'm going to go to graduate school. And I started to say I was going to apply to Maryland, I was going to apply to MICA, I was going to apply, I can't remember what the other one was. But then I was introduced to an organization called Black Artists of DC. And what happened was I got kind of like indoctrinated into an art family. And by the time it was time to apply, it was only Howard that was speaking to me. Because so much of that foundation that I was getting from Black Artists of DC was from the grouping, the community of Howardites and people that were already in the industry and curators and that had such a grounding influence by Howard's art, department and artists that had come out of that department. So I feel like it was just supposed to be. Yeah. I never applied to any place else. Eventually, I just applied to Howard. And the funny thing about it, because Al Smith was the chair at that point, and he's an artist and professor. And I had a series of collages. And so Al and you have to submit the work first, right, at that point, because that's when you submitted a portfolio, an actual portfolio, And he said, he brought me in, he was like, Amber, you know that you're supposed to go to undergrad first, right? Like undergrad in art. And I was like, no. I had a plan, But luckily he saw, something in my portfolio of collages at that point, and he accepted me into the program. So
how did you choose what was in your portfolio?
Well, I had people help me assist. you know, in terms of which collages were the best to represent my work at that point. Yeah.
And Dean Rashad, how about you? Why did you choose Howard?
I had been groomed from early age. My father was a graduate of the College of Dentistry, class of 45. And from early age, my father was always talking about Howard University. And he was very intentional in showing me anything written about Howard University, especially things that were happening in the drama department, which is what it was called at that time. And there had been a tour in the UK of the Howard University Players, sponsored by the State Department. He was very careful to show me that. And I was quite young when he was showing me these things. So when it came time to apply, he looked at me and he said, "Darling, you can apply to any school you want, but you're going to Howard."
That's right.
There was a time when parents had more to say, you know. Yeah. And you know what? He was so right. The education and the training that I received there just prepared me for everything that I have encountered in my career. That foundation was laid there, that foundation for leaning into craft, that foundation for work ethic, loving the work, knowing that it would be hours of work, that there were things other students were participating in that I just wouldn't be able to go to, and it was okay because I was working. And then upon graduation, it was like, it didn't matter whether a play that I was offered was on a Broadway stage or on top of a garbage can on the corner. Performing, working, continuing to work and grow was the most important thing, and that had been instilled in me at Howard University.
Okay. So it sounds like you both had very rewarding experiences at Howard, but what would you say was the most pivotal moment while you were there that was like, oh yes, this is why I'm here and this is why I chose Howard?
On the spot.
So many pivotal moments.
I'll tell you mine. So I was at Howard, graduating in 2019. I was not in fine arts, but I was in School of Communications, studying broadcast journalism. And one day I was walking on the yard. You know, the yard is our favorite place. I was walking through the yard, and I just looked up, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is beautiful. When will I ever be in another environment like this? It was so beautiful. People were out there with their picnics. Obviously, it was, during the spring when it was nice out there singing, rapping. There was people on the steps of fine arts, and you just look around, and it was just so robust and diverse and just filled with, so much knowledge and love. And that's when I was like, okay, yeah, this is where I'm meant to be.
Well, now that you've said that, and I'm thinking, I'm going to say it was my first spring.
Okay.
You start off in the fall, and you're kind of shaky because you don't know where you are, right? And meeting people that you didn't expect you would, and not knowing what to do. Then comes the winter, and it's cold, and you're making it up that hill to go to classes, and it looks like it's always going to be this way. But when spring came, it was magical. It was absolutely magical. And coats and hats came off. Yes. And you could see the people on the yard and this life, all of this life. Yeah, it was that first spring.
This is spring, I'm telling you. How about you?
So I'm going to start with, I went to magnet schools in Arlington, Virginia. Right, I was raised in Arlington, Virginia. And so the other aspect of why I chose Howard was about, because in the magnet schools, I was always a handful. I was always in the handful of us in the larger environments, right? And so I wanted the reverse of that. So that also helped me make my decision to choose Howard, because once you get here, you realize, because it really was a representation of what we call the Mecca.
Yes.
And
it just felt right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I also have the art community, and so yeah, that's what helped me make the final, and that's one of my pivotal decisions moments.
And that support that you get from Howard is so real. Like, even to this day, all of my best friends, all of my greatest mentors are from Howard University. So I'm so grateful for that. But obviously, we were all at Howard at different times. You as a graduate student, and you are back at Howard now. I want to know, in your opinion, how has Howard evolved?
Oh my goodness. Well, when a thing is good, it gets better. Better, into best and best and best and the best and the best and the best. This is what I see happening at Howard.
Yeah. How about you, Amber?
So what is the chair of the art department now? What's his name?
Dr. Babush.
Thank you. I think that he has a vision for where the art department is going, and it's broad to some degree, and I think it's a good thing. And just like you guys, I've seen the department in various forms, various morphing, and I'm just encouraged by the fact that there is a large agenda, and that hopefully it is going to also support, further support, and exist as a canon for the artists and the range of artists that come out of that department. I'm encouraged.
Yeah. And I like that you said a canon, because to me that means we need to pour into the students in order for them, to take off like a cannon. What are some of the things that you all...
That's what I had real quick. So the canon I'm referring to is the academic and art career canon.
Okay.
Very specific. And so other institutions, specifically art institutions, they have a ready-made canon process, right? And that means that they partner with institutions, they bring their alumnus back in, they have exhibits with them, they have this cycle of how to help propel artists, the range of artists, into the actual world and be able to function with their degrees and not have, so there is a process. And not to say that Howard does not currently, but I'm encouraged by the mission to elevate that even more.
Yeah. And I think if we look right here in this room, like all of this art filled by Howard students, I think that's an example of that. But what are some of the things that we can be pouring into these students to advance them as artists? And as you two as esteemed artists now, what do you wish you had?
I wish I had an opportunity to go to the British American drama.
And how come?
Well, after being able to afford that opportunity to students who came after me, and I could see their growth, the breadth of their growth, and the intellectual expansion and understanding of theater and of language and its use. I'm speaking specifically of Chadwick Boseman, Susan Pileggi Watson, and Camilla Forbes, 3 among 10 who went.
Yeah.
We didn't have that opportunity when I was a student. Pardon me. I'll tell you this, and this is true. There was a teacher who taught speech, and she was an Irish lady, well-intentioned, I'm sure. One day, this lady said to us, and she'd been on faculty for a number of years, right? She said, "You must know that I have an affinity for the Negro, otherwise why would I be here?"
Oh my goodness.
Wait.
Oh, there's more?
There's more. I must encourage you all to seek another vocation. There is no room for the Negro in the theater. This was being said to us by an instructor in the department as the Negro Ensemble Company was forming in New York. And thank God for that.
Yeah.
Because we could see not only is there room, there's lots of room. And not only that, we're going to make more room. So we all sat there looking at her, kind of dumbfounded. By the end of the semester, I don't mean any shade, but this is true, the lady was walking backwards and seeing little green men in the corner. She was delusional.
Oh no.
But my point is that now the focus at Howard University, the focus at the Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts, is to be the premier institution for education, training, development, and research in art in the diaspora. And that is happening now. We have new leadership in each department, and each department head has a broad vision for their department. What's happening in the Department of Theater Arts, the Department of Art, and the Department of Music, extraordinary things.
So what I would like to see, I referred to the canon, right, and specifically the art canon. Part of what happens is that there is a cycle that happens in relationship to connecting, to making, to networking, to placing the artist, whatever capacity that means for them, into relationships and engagements and internships and fellowships and things like that. There should be a continuous flow of that, including engaging in other institutions around that area, meaning the tri-state area that we are referring to. And I also would like to see, there's a level of engagement that doesn't happen with alumnus. And we have some phenomenal people in the various industries that are doing it. Living, breathing, working, functioning with their degrees. And I say that's not a light thing. Do you know what I mean? Not everybody, especially after you pay so much money, to still be utilizing your degree and successfully functioning in your intended career path. I would like to see that happening when it comes to Howard. There are professional artists that are surpassing, and there should be a multi-generational engagement that happens throughout. Period.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, I'm glad that you say that, because we are in a room full of Howard alum, Howard students, us ourselves, Howard alum. While we're all in the room, what are some things that we can take away from this conversation that we can give back to Howard?
Yeah. Well, first off, I would like both entities, the persons, the actual graduates, and the institution, not to see it as giving back. I want them to see it as giving forward, giving to, exchanging, replenishing. Because sometimes when we think, and unless you're specifically talking about Sankofa giving back, that's rooted in a whole line and ancestral giving and receiving and being a part of community. The Western version of giving back makes it seem as though there's something wrong with that process. It's like that it's an added effort. It shouldn't be. It should be a flow of how, if you are doing what you love, then the flow should be continuous, ongoing, worthy and like reciprocity. That's my belief. And so I think that there needs to be a change in that, how we teach that. Additionally, and this is not Howard, this is not only Howard, the institutions do not teach artists how to function as artists, meaning as business entrepreneurs.
Okay.
This is a problem in academia, period, but very specifically in the art departments throughout the United States.
and I would venture to say in other institutions, and meaning outside, abroad, there is a disconnect between art, artists, and income, entrepreneurship. That, and one of the things I say when I talk about my experience, I mentioned Black Artists of BC, which is I want to say, African-centered community that supports artists in the various ranges, right? And so in 2005, same time I entered Howard, I entered Black Artists of DC, and I started attending their meetings. So eventually, I look at it as though I was in a dual master's program. I was in Howard MFA program, and I was started as a member. I then began to work on their Elders Council. So I was one of the people that helped them form their 501c3. I started curating, then I became the vice president, and then I became the president. So along these times, I'm still getting my master's. I'm exhibiting, I'm and meeting people like Mr. Gilliam, Sam Gilliam. We had curators come in. There was a range of things that was happening. So you're being taught how to do the art, right? But then you had this parallel organization that was teaching you how to be a practicing artist, not maybe an entrepreneur, but that's the duality that we have to figure out how to teach. Not only artists, right? And how I consider myself an artist, but the other ranges. It's more structured when you have doctors or dentists, but they don't see it the same when you're talking about fine and visual arts when it comes to academic institutions. And so I'm not specifically talking only about Howard. I am talking about the institutions. I want to make that clear. So because of this duality that I was existing in, and because how it helped me then propel into the industry, I like to think I have an interesting perspective about the industry in general.
What years were you at Howard?
I was there from 2005, and I graduated in 2011.
So you were there during the time in which there was no College of Fine Arts.
That is true.
You were there during the time, and for those of you who may not know, the College of Fine Arts was established in 1960. And through the years, those programs built up and flourished to the point where there were 750 students in the College of Fine Arts. Full accreditation in all 3 departments. And the decision was taken on the level of trusteeship to move the College of Fine Arts into the College of Liberal Arts and created what was called the College of Arts and Sciences, and to remove an entire college with full accreditation into a division. I had been invited to serve on the board, and this was their first order of business in my first meeting. You can imagine my shock. Why did this happen? This happened because there was a concept to which they would move the university into research institution. Not understanding the arts are all about research. Not understanding the disciplines and therefore not valuing the disciplines. Making a decision which they thought was their best decision. But now in the College of Fine Arts, and we are a newly established College of Fine Arts in just 3 years. This is just the 3rd year of this re-established college, and look where our students are for the 2nd time. So what you're asking for is happening. It didn't happen in your time, but it is happening now, and I think my students would agree with that. Yes?
Okay, well, I'm glad that that's happening now. Shout out to the transformation, shout out to the constant evolution that's necessary. So I want to get into the creative process now. So you have a new exhibit, Surely She is a Little Animal. Could you tell us a little bit about that title?
Yes, I can't get this to run. Thank you. So, so the exhibit, that particular work is the intersection of conversation around the evolution of child protective services, human rights. You have conversation about imperialism, colonialism, and human ecology. So which one is it that I do? The green
one.
All right. So I'm going to skip a couple just because the question that you asked, the images are all the way. All right. So this is the Montgomery Brawl. These are all based on, if you look at the central form, it's reminiscent of a totem, or I said that it's based on a conversation around human ecology. And human ecology is where you have the systems, some are natural systems that are scientific systems that are in place in our world, period. But then you have the industrialized and the created systems in which we have created and formed and placed upon ourselves, right? But my strife, to some degree, with human ecology is that we have not factored in race. And to me, that's just, it's delusional. Race is absolutely should be included in the conversation around how we relate to ourselves, to our environment, and to the institutions and things that we create in our world. And so I've used it as an underpinning of this series. So if you look, you'll see Mary Ellen Wilson, a very small female child that is in the bottom. Her story was the impetus for the establishment of Child Protective Services. In my research, I realized that our institutes, so our environment, society, created more laws around the protection of animal rights prior to the protection of children's rights. And all this was preempted for me because, I don't know if you guys remember in 2017 when Cecil the lion was killed. And I remember thinking, of course, like, I'm hurt. Like, I don't think hunting should be a practice, period. But I was thrown by the ways in which people, groups of people were reacting to the death of this lion. And in the same sense, the high media attention that was given to the brown and black lives that were killed throughout that same period, like starting in 2012, 2014, you had very, very public deaths of black and brown people in the way they were discussed in the media. And so I said, how do I have this conversation? How do I talk about the ways in which we look at animals, the way we look at children, and the way we look at white lives versus brown and people of color? So then that took me into morality. This can't be moral. So I started looking in terms of morality, in terms of religion, in terms of social practices. And then it dawned on me to look at how children and animals are related in relationship to how abuse. So the abuse of this child was preempted. And in this conversation with the Animal Society at the time, it wasn't the Animal Society, but what was standing as an animal society. There was a conversation with a social worker and the people from the Animal Society, and they were saying, but surely she is an animal. Surely she deserves the care that we would afford an animal to a child. So that preempted this conversation. So every form in this series of works is grounded by Mary Ellen, and then you have these little, lighthearted puppies, and because humans relate, specifically some groups of people relate to animals in a very specific way, more so than they do the death and abuse and awful treatment of black and brown bodies. And I'm not just talking about people of African Americans, people of African descent. I'm talking about people of color, what I consider of color, melanin, and or specific languages and or specific cultures. So this is the way that I address some of that in the works that I create. So this one specifically is Montgomery Brawl. I was fascinated by watching what was going on, and to me it was a representation of what I'm describing. How we are treated, how people of color are contextualized, abused, and manipulated and thrown into societies, and just angers me. And this is one of the ways in which I talk about that through the works.
And how has the response been for this work?
You know, there's always, okay, sorry, I'm gonna make sure you can see the whole slide. It's very interesting because you don't get a direct response. Like, for example, people that have seen it have absolutely said they love it, and we've done talks about it, but it's artwork, so some of it has to happen in relationship to the people that see the image and or that experience it. And or the people that either purchase, speak, comment, engage in the various forms, and they do that. But you don't get a full range of what that experience is for them.
And I'm glad that you said that, because that brings me to my next point. So we're now in a very digital age, right? With social media, easy access, people can comment on, people's opinions matter, all of that. So in this age, with both of you as creators, and I heard you talk a lot about this and in the things that your mother taught you and just really trusting in yourself, how have you been able to turn that off and just continue to create and continue to be inspired while still seeing all of the feedback, even though some of it may not be positive? And especially because, art is such a vulnerable thing. To share what you've conceived with the world, that's such a vulnerable experience. So how can you put your vulnerabilities on the table, get feedback, negative and positive, and then continue?
In theater, in television, and in film, the artist works in community with other artists and technicians. Our work is not solitary. A visual artist's work is more solitary. Yes?
A portion of it, absolutely.
That portion of it is, okay. So we are constantly engaging with other people. We are constantly engaging with people who may or may not look like us, think like us, dress like us, pray like us, believe like us. But we are constantly engaging with one another to create a product. And so with this in mind, we come together as one. It happens time and time and time and time again. We come together as one. In my lifetime, I have witnessed many things. I was a teenager during the Civil Rights Movement. And I didn't just watch it on television, I participated in it. In our living room, Texas Southern University students were meeting to plan their sit-ins. That wasn't necessarily a very safe thing to do, but my mother was never safe. She's a poet and a scholar. Through it all, and what I saw as a child in the Civil Rights Movement was the goal of recognition of one humanity. That was what I saw as a child. The recognition and affirmation of humanity in all. This is what Martin Luther King spoke about. He had gone to India, he had met Mahatma Gandhi. This is where the nonviolent movement came from, because Mahatma Gandhi had successfully diligently convinced and implemented this in India to fight against the British Raj and to defeat it. So as a child, this is what I was seeing, that our hope for the future rests in recognition of humanity in all. And this is the great gift of the artist, however we express it, because we are individuals. We are not monolithic in thought, in concept. But if you look deeply into all expression, this is the ultimate goal: recognition of humanity, respect for humanity, the right to hold one's dignity and live in it fully. So as a young person who was looking at signs that said "for white only" on the water fountains, and when I was 9 years old, I looked at that sign and I thought, I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna taste that water. I'm gonna see what this is like. And I did. I tasted that water and it tasted the same. And without being able to articulate it as a 9-year-old child, what I understood was that people had tricked themselves. People had tricked themselves into not seeing their own humanity in each other. So somewhere in my thinking there began this forming of what my work as an artist would be about. And it would be many years before I could articulate it. But what my work as an artist is about, no matter who I'm portraying, is to reveal that we, human beings, are much more alike than we could ever be different. And given the opportunity, the real opportunity, we're really willing to embrace the likeness. It's all the nonsense and foolishness, the propaganda and stuff that gets in the way.
So how do you step aside from that propaganda and continue to focus on the light of humanity?
Just what I just said. It's through my work.
Through the artistry.
Through the artistry, through the work itself. The work itself is the light.
Then
How
maybe
about
you have
you,
to
Emma?
factor in what's the alternative. What's the alternative? I'm not willing for the alternative. I'm not willing to give up on myself. I'm not willing to give up on my brother, my mother, my sister, my cousin, my friends. And for what I value and how that manifests, how I try to make that manifest in my artwork. And I'm not saying there absolutely are times when you're like, Lord have mercy, this is a lot of work. Right. This is a lot of energy, this is a lot of reaching, research, all the various aspects. But I don't know who I would be if I could not contribute to even the idea of a better, more equal, a more advantageous, more balanced society. I don't want to know who I would be if I was to look the other way. Like literally, that makes my yeah, it makes me feel like that, like your blood crawling type of thing. But I do have it. Excuse me. Can we get the images? Because I wanted to answer your questions in relation to one of the series. Okay, let me go back. So there is a series that I did. That I did called Successions Traversing U.S. Colonialism, and it is a double-sided. There it is. Okay. And literally, I was doing research on the ways in which the U.S. government has affected its citizens that reside in the U.S. territories. And so that means I included the Federal District of Columbia, You have Puerto Rico, you have the U.S. Virgin Islands, you have Northern Mariana Islands, and you have Guam. And on the front, I dissect either the territory's seal and or the flag, and I give commentary, visual commentary. And on the back, I have an interpretation of what their spiritual energy is. And overall, this is a conversation about people of the greater majority. And people of the greater majority, we are in, so the way that our society has been structured, our media, our news, our entertainment, is as though people of color are not the majority. But that is not really a reality. And it hasn't been for a very long time. And so through these works, I am trying to continue or contribute to a conversation about how the lens in which we use and see and activate and engage each other. Because we have to continue to work towards shifting that. We have been imposed a lens on ourselves, just like you were meant. I'm making what I would call like a correlation. Because we are all human beings, but we've been taught to see ourselves and to react differently. And to me, that's, of course, y'all know that's problematic.
Yeah. So, okay, we've talked about the external process and how people have viewed work externally and how we've used community to get us through that. But what about internally? And I know even to create this alone, there has to be a level of trust for yourself that you have to have in order to trust your vision and in order to create. So can you all talk me through the process of trusting yourself and what that looked like?
Yes, I want to say that it feels like, for me, like you mentioned practices, in terms of, I see practice as the regimen that how you treat yourself, how you feed yourself, how you form your environments, and then the people that you have around you, and of course how you then treat other people. I think that you cannot, at least in my opinion, you can't try and heal yourself if you then treat people in an ugly way. That's not real healing. That's a facade. And ultimately, it's not only detrimental to the people that you are harming, but it's also detrimental to yourselves. And we are all cellular beings. So I think that shows up in different ways for different people. But what I like to think of it as is that it's a cycle. There is an engagement. Sometimes it happens every 3 years, every 5 years. That I feel like you have to assess how you are showing up in the world, how you are showing up for yourself. How you are showing up for others. What does that mean in terms of your vocation, your career, your family? Those are some of the things that come up in my brain.
What does that assessment look like? Is it like a checklist?
Well, I think it varies per person, but you have to gauge what's important to you. Your relationship with your siblings, your relationship with your parents, and or people that care for you. How is that feeling, per this year, per this Christmas, per this holiday? And I will say, sometimes as an artist, there are things you got to, not participate in. You're here, you're there, you're in Paris, you're in whatever. And those are hard times. And I don't think many of us talk about that, but they do add up too. There's still a loss, the things that I haven't been able to participate with my niece. Because I've had to opt, for the career. And I say career, but it's also to pay my bills. Right. So those are some of the things that I gauge for myself.
Okay. How about you, Dean Rashad? What did your process of trusting yourself look like?
I have to spend time with myself so I get to know myself. And that is ongoing. Because when you spend time with yourself and you really spend time engaged in self-inquiry, this is not selfishness. This is not a selfish act. It is actually one of the most generous things that we can do as human beings. Because what we discover inside ourselves is awesome and connects to everything and everyone else. But we won't know that if we don't spend time with ourselves. And sometimes it gets very, very busy. And when it gets very, very busy and there's so much activity, the mind can waver from its center. And then all of a sudden you look up and there's a world of thought just buzzing around in your head, whether you ask it to or not. And that's really the most important time, to spend time with oneself, to bring it back to center.
Especially when there's so many things in our environment that are pulling, that are tagging, that are beeping, that are clicking, that are requesting, and that are...
That's exactly right.
Yes.
That's exactly
It becomes
right.
even more critical and challenging.
Yeah.
But it has to happen.
Essential.
Because that is the space. That is the creative space. That quiet center. I love this space.
Yeah.
I love experiencing this space during performance. It is magical.
So you're able to tap into that whenever you need to.
Everybody is.
Amen.
Everybody's able to tap into that. You just have to really decide that that's what you want to do. And give yourself towards the practice of it. It's such a beautiful experience. And the things that come are beyond what I could have thought of or imagined. And they're so, and I know it's true when at the end of a performance, you feel that from people. And they express that. They don't know what it was, but all of a sudden it was like this or like that. And all of a sudden I felt, you know, in performance of August Wilson's Gem of the Ocean, one performance, a gentleman had come from Germany and he didn't speak English very well and he didn't know colloquialisms and idioms. But he said, after the scene to the journey to the City of Bones, I understood everything that happened before and after.
Wow.
Because I'd seen that space. And this is the power of art. This is the true power of art.
Wow. So can you both tell me the pivotal moment in your career when you were like, okay, this changes how I approach my work?
Okay, you first.
No, you first.
I don't know. So, to some extent, there was a time where I went through something that was happening in my family. And, you know, we all had family drama, or family incident that turns into drama, you know? Right, that. And so there was a point in which I had to pull back from almost everything, right? And in doing that, that also meant that there was only a certain amount of information that I could absorb. Like, for example, I had to shut down news. The family drama was so deep that I had to shut down news. I couldn't take in what was happening with the news on the regular, and this was an extended period. And so as your life begins to then, as you figure out how to go through and rectify, pray, absorb, and engage, you know, with the issues and your regular life, over a period of time, I then was able to slowly, you know, interject sections of the news and or outside sources into my, you know, and not to say that I wasn't doing my career, art life and all that, but still, it was a navigation. It felt like a tightrope, you know, walking. And so I remember having to look at
my artwork. And my artwork has always had undertones of like conversation about gender and patriarchy, right? But then I had to shift because, not shift, depending on the narrative, idea, commission, I also decided that I needed to figure out how to use my voice through my work to speak about what was happening to us in general, the treatment of people of color. Because, and it's funny, I got the little chills again, because that was a pivotal moment for me, to be able to use my work, use my craft, and then even dive further into research, because I love, research. I love art history. I love it. That was essential, and I'm not joyful that there's a reason I have to create those works, meaning around race, around abuse, but I'm joyful that I'm able to, and appreciative that I'm able to figure out how to convey it and to continue and to make people draw in, because it's not only, there's also an aesthetic portion of it. And then there's the didactic, and figuring out how to make that make sense in the works. And then also talk about it, because not everybody realizes that you can put something out there, hey, everybody look at that. But that alone is not going to draw people to your product, your idea, your energy. You have to be able to converse. You have to be able to engage. You have to be, at least in my opinion, you have to be able to speak about your work, speak about your process. And a lot of us artists don't want to, acknowledge it or accept that you got to be able to write about your work. And those two are not the same. So, yeah. I hope that answers your question. That was a little far.
No, that answers. It sounds like you have had to channel pain in order to create a vessel for conversation, for aesthetics, for the greater good of humanity.
Yeah, and part of it. Thank you for saying that, because you said channel and vessel, and that triggered. So what I did was I started to create altars. I looked at what I was experiencing with my family, and I started to realize, one, I started the practice of having an altar in your home. And then I realized, I remember going back home with my mother and realizing, somebody told me, girl, you need an altar. You need to go get yourself an altar. And I thought to myself, she's right. This is deep, And I remember going back into my home, and then I would see little aspects, little groupings of the beginnings of altars. I didn't realize that I was
collecting all along.
And then I decided, okay, universe, well, this is still an issue. I got to continue to work on this. It ain't going to just evaporate. So I said, all right, I'm going to create altars, and I'm going to show them. And it became this morphing from altars into temporary installations, into permanent installations, site-specific installations, and then public artwork. Wow. So it was amazing to me. I'm like, I could feel myself like when you start to feel like you're going to cry? Look, I'm a crier. But I'm not going to do it now. But I've said that because it's amazing how sometimes you don't like the pain, but you have to work through it. You have to work with it. And it helps you to move through, to create, to evolve.
And allow it to work with you. That's what I've learned. How would you do, Rashad? What was your pivotal moment that changed your approach to work?
And thank you for the question. Now I'm like, that's a good question.
When I understood that I'm not the doer, and that with the right understanding, the work that I do, when offered, performed as an offering, becomes service. That changed.
So it's not for you. It's greater. Okay, I like that. I'm going to ask you all one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience to ask any questions that they may have. Not who, unless it is a who, but what has been your greatest teacher thus far?
No? Okay, I'll go first. Okay, so my greatest influence thus far are my mom and the women in my life. My mom, bless her heart, you know, my mom is like my part of my soul, you know, and she allowed me to be, like, I know I was paired with my mother divinely. And I love my grandmother. I hope she never sees, because this question has been asked before and I've answered it in the same way. I hope she never sees these, because you know, grandma don't want to, you know, you don't want to tell your grandma, well, grandma, you know, they're not always nice sometimes. My grandmother was not always nice.
Mine either.
See? So, but my mother made, my mother made a conscious effort, like a soul effort, to not treat her children like she was treated. And for those of you that are like, oh, she's talking about her family, I think that more of us need to be honest, and honest out loud. I love my grandmother. Do I like her all the time? No. But I love her. And it makes me love my mama so much more. My mommy allowed me to be authentically Amber. And without her, damn, I might cry again. Without her, I wouldn't be here. Not in this form, not being able to, you know, I wouldn't be here. So it's my mom. But on the same token, my grandmother was a collector. She is a collector. My grandmother, she worked for FEMA. She traveled the world. She has this world. She'll tell people about her garden, like, don't come over here in my garden. That's from Hawaii. That's from all the places that she's traveled to. I mean, so, and then my great-great-grandma, her name was Carmelita, and she was she ran a tart shop or like a bakery and candy store out of her home. I mean, I literally can see it. Every time I think of her, I can see it, like what I saw it as a child. So, in some sense, you know, we have to deal with what is not the ideal, but also remember that there are other nourishing factors, nourishing aspects, nourishing characteristics that we can walk away with, you know, or help resonate within us. But it doesn't mean I'm going to lie to myself or lie to anybody else and say that I always like the way that those people act when they're not kind.
That's a teacher too.
It is. But it's about your perspective, how you. So that's why I talk about my family when people ask me questions like that. Hopefully they'll, you know, still love me.
They'll love.
Thank you.